Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Racer Insider Show. I'm Travis Turner, pleased to be with always my partner, the Racer Insider, Lindy Suter, and a very special guest today, former racer coach Mark Gottfried, going to join us and talk about the great times during his career. And, man, I got a little homemade graphic I'm going to throw up here in a minute to show you a little bit about what happened for the Racers when Coach was here. I also want to remind people, and you have to be at least as old as me, but if you are and you love college basketball, you know Coach Gottfried was one of the great three-point shooters in America for one of my favorite coaches, Wimp Sanderson. And we're going to talk a lot about Coach being with the Racers, but I may have to ask him about those days with Coach Sanderson just a little bit. We do want to remind you our show brought to you by our friends at Suter Insurance Group, SuterINSgroup.com on the web. And Lindy's got a great team there. We look forward to talking to you about their great products. But Lindy wanted me to mention it and get right to work with Coach. And so, Coach, so excited to have you with us. And while we bring you in, I'm going to throw some of these numbers here on the board. And I asked my graphic design team to throw a dashing young coach in here under Gottfried's mark. I wanted a guy that looked just like you did back in the day.
I like it.
There's the record, the body of work, 95 through 98. Look at that 98 season, by the way, 29-4, 16-2 in the OVC. Finished the year ranked number 25 in the country. So many great things, so many great players, so many great moments. He also helped get the Racer Insider kicked off back in the day in the published paper version. And one of the neat things under Coach Gottfried's tenure, the Racer program started off on a win streak that at home it would eventually reach 47, which was the best in the country at the time, and they were undefeated in OVC play. So many great memories. But, Coach, when you think back about that time, and obviously you're a young man coming off a great experience at UCLA, you had some familiarity, obviously, with Murray State, your Uncle Mike, a great, great coach in his own right in the game of football here at Murray State and then beyond. But when I say Murray State to you, what's the first thing that pops into your mind?
Best time of my life. How about that one?
That's pretty good.
That's good.
I loved my time. And Lindy and I have talked about this. And first of all, thank you guys for having me on. And what a privilege. And I can go back and remember when that first Racer Insider, when Lindy showed it to me, the very first one, the cover, and he was excited. I was excited, but it was something that Murray State needed, the athletic department. We've had so much success before I was there, and then obviously after. But I would tell people all the time, probably the three most fun years, and I loved being at Alabama as a head coach. I was in the ACC at NC State. UCLA was fabulous. But, those years in Murray were so good for me individually, and I'm so thankful for them because there's so much support, and the wind is behind your back all the time there when you're coaching. And, obviously, Lindy, I would say that Lindy probably knows, especially the basketball program, but all the sports, probably better than anybody that I know, period. And anyway, you get to be the coach there and you begin to feel it right away, how everybody is pushing for you. Everybody's trying to help the community support, everything. It was amazing. And you don't always get that at other places. That's always not the case. And so it's such a unique place. It's such a wonderful place. So anyway, for me, I look back on those 3 years, and they're some of the best I ever had.
Lindy, I want to take you guys back to the start, and I'm going to start with your perspective from where your position was as a great fan and your family, so much support for this program. I want to let you talk about what it was like to watch the process that brought Coach to Murray State, and then we'll get it from him, what it was like for him to go through the process of considering the next step in his career.
Actually, believe it or not, I remember it very well the first time I met Mark. I remember it well. We had 5 candidates for the job. Buzz Peterson was one of them. Mike Anderson was one of them. Kenny Roth was involved. It was Coach Gottfried. And for some reason, out of the blue, Paul Evans came into the picture. I still don't know where that came from, but he came out right field at the very end. But part of the deal was at that time, I was very involved the Racer Club, which was a huge, really good organization back in that day, where you had president, you had board of directors, you really had a good organization. And so I ended up being president of the Racer Club. And of course, because of my involvement there and my basketball involvement, I got to go to lunch with all these candidates. And of course, it was Pollyeyes is where we met. That's where Mark met me at Pollyeyes. We went to Pollyeyes to eat, and I was very impressed with him from right off the bat. And of course, having Mike here before, we could kind of relate. And at that time, you got to remember, I was 39 years old, and Mark, what were you, 34?
I think I was
somewhere around there. Huh? 31? 31. Golly, I didn't know that. Yeah, I knew you were in your early 30s. But anyway, it got into we came in for the interview, and of course, after it was over, Strickland would always ask me, "What do you think? What do you think?" Well, I said, well, Mark Gottfried is the best of the five, but he's not going to come to Murray State. He's not going to come to Murray State. I said, and then of course, right off the bat, he was California cool then. I mean, he came in, he was a cool dude. Yeah, the first thing he did was get him a big purple Cadillac down there from the Purdums. I remember that well. But anyway, the really thing what I liked about Mark was the very beginning was big time. I remember that slogan. You remember the slogan, Mark? Big time. And when he came in here, that was their thoughts. And that's why, you know me, Travis, I've always thought big. Since the first days we started doing radio show and I started doing Insider, I like to think big. And Mark was one of the coaches that came in, and that's what he did. We didn't recruit against OVC schools. We tried to recruit against SEC schools. And I was sold on him. He was a basketball guy. He's a young guy. I'll never forget all the phone calls we'd have at 11 and 12 o'clock at night, just talking about the game that's on the satellite that we actually got him for Christmas. A big old satellite dish where he could watch all these games. Me and Don Simpkins bought him that for Christmas one year. And but anyway, yeah, it was that was the very beginning. And then, like he said, his 3 best years. I know people ask me this all the time because, like I've been a fan for 60 years, right, Travis? We're doing our 60 years right now.
That's right.
It's hard to believe that I've seen all those teams and all those banners and all those coach practices going all the way back to, to the 60s. So that's kind of neat that I've been able to do that. And I will have to say this, I guess the timing of everything and the way Mark treated me personally. I mean, the way he treated me personally, he really did. He really appreciated our support. He really appreciated the Racer Insider, and he showed it. He showed it to me often. But those 3 years, Travis, and I think I've mentioned to you this, not just to Mark, were my 3 favorite years too, out of 60. And
that's pretty good.
And it was just the whole thing, just the whole fun of it, the big time. The players we had were very entertaining too. I mean, DT Mays, what an entertainer he was. I mean, you had Isaac Spencer, the ultimate warrior, and it was just the whole bunch and the assistant coaches with Coach T. And, we just really became all really close, really close. The only thing I regret, I wish we'd had cell phones and stuff when Mark left. Because, no, it was really hard to stay connected.
Right.
You can maybe make a phone call somehow or another, but I'm sure that if we'd had phones, we'd have probably been texting weekly. And we have kept our friendship over all these years, and that even though we might not have talked often, he always, like that note I think I shared with you, Travis.
Yeah, really special.
He said, I'd run through a brick wall for you, and even though we've been separated by miles in different schools, he was only here 3 years out of our life. So, but a very impactful 3 years, and like I said, I'll never forget them. So much fun. All the stories we can tell, Mark, down there at Tennessee State when we got stowed out and we were there ready to play, but they couldn't get up the hill, I guess was the deal. And we're stuck in the hotel room. And Mark's got BB on the phone. And I remember, you think I just fell off of a turnip truck? Do I have written across my forehead? And but anyway, that was fun. That was quite the story. But we could go on and on and on about the 3 years of different stories. But just what a fun time for me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Coach, on your end, then the process. How was it for you in making that decision, going through all that to decide that the next critical step in your career was going to happen in Murray, Kentucky?
It's really an interesting question, and it almost didn't happen because we had just won the national championship, in Seattle on a Monday night, and we flew back to LA on Tuesday. I think we were on the Jay Leno show. On Wednesday, we're throwing out the first pitch at Dodger Stadium, and on Thursday, I think we're doing a parade at Disneyland. I mean, LA just went crazy, and so
Right.
here we are in the midst of all that celebration of the championship. And in the meantime, I'm getting a call from Mike Strickland, and, you want to come in. And I was a little torn because I did have a great affinity for Murray State. I remember when my Uncle Mike was there, I remember going down into the, lower parts of Stewart Stadium there in his office. He had the big football office down there. It was beautiful and all that. But and so the funny part of the story is, and I think Lindy knows this part too, Buzz Peterson and I were good friends. Buzz was at Vanderbilt, and I had a layover in St. Louis. And I remember calling Buzz, and I said, Buzz, do you want this job at Murray State? And he said, yeah, I really want it. And I said, well, here's what I'm going to do then. I don't think I'm going to take it, but I'm going to, everywhere I go, I'm just going to talk you up. That's all I'm going to do is I'm going to try to tell you to everybody. Well, I get into Murray, and all of a sudden, it's like, I kind of like it here. I kind of like myself. And, everybody's, showing a lot of attention to me and all that. And so now I'm torn really bad because, UCLA and, we had a thing rolling too, where I thought we were going to continue to be good. We had Baron Davis lined up to come. We had the Collins twins end up going to Stanford. I mean, we had all these kids in Southern California, like ready. And so I'm thinking, man, we might be able to, make another run or two at UCLA. But here's the one thing I always knew in my gut was, I had the national championship kind of on my resume, and I just needed to make sure the move I made as a head coach, I wanted to make sure I had a chance to win. And it wasn't the biggest school that I wasn't interested in the biggest school out there. And, I had people telling me, hey, Mark, if you wait, you can get to your first head coaching job to be a bigger school at a different conference, all that kind of stuff. But to me, it was just about all I need to do is have a chance to win. If I do that, then, maybe my career goes from there. And so I knew that at Murray because of the support of people. And I kind of went back and forth in my mind. I was a little torn, but and then I remember taking the job. I remember waking up and said, okay, I'm going to take this job. And we did the press conference, and it was late at night. And I remember standing at the top of the stairs. I was looking down you had to go down the stairs into the men's basketball offices there at the football stadium. And it was kind of late at night, and I was by myself. And then I kind of looked around. I said, hold on a minute. What did I just do? What did I just do? I just left UCLA. I'm standing here, and they hadn't cut the weeds in a while. The weeds were kind of overgrowing the steps. I'm thinking, what in the world did I just do? But, I just remember saying, this is going to be a great move. It's a great place. The support here is going to be wonderful. But anytime you take that big step, I went from an assistant coach to being a head coach. You're always a little bit nervous, a little bit scared. But if I looking back on it, there's nowhere I would have rather my first head coaching job be rather than Murray State. Nowhere, period. And because, like I said, the community was, I didn't even realize it when I took the job, but then shortly thereafter, you started to see the people that were all behind the program, everybody, everywhere you turn. And so it wasn't very long after I was like, man, this is going to be great. And then, obviously getting to know Lindy better and, just the people in town, they were fabulous. And anyway, it ended up being just a wonderful decision to take the job at Murray State.
How about getting to coach your 3 years in the last 3 years of Racer Arena?
Lindy,
talk about that last year, especially 97, 98, the last year in Racer Arena, your best team that you had while you were here. Yep. And you can even go back to that last regular season game against TSU, and I'll watch it often. One of the best games that's ever been played in the arena happened to be that last game. It had every emotion that could happen. We almost got into it with them. DT was down there, doing apple turnovers or whatever it was. Said they were serving apple turnovers today at TSU. But anyway, that game. But talk about that experience too. I know you was looking forward to the new arena, and I know you flew one recruit over the construction site. I remember that.
It was a tricky one because when I got the job, I think Kern Alexander, who was the president, said, we're going to build this arena. And I knew that it had been in discussions for about 25 years. And every time the president came in, they would start to change the plans and it would get delayed. And so on one hand, you're like, okay, we got this great arena and they broke ground finally. On the other hand, I'm like, boy, I love Racer Arena though, man. I don't want to, I'm not sure I want to get out of this building. And the home court advantage in Racer Arena. There's only one place now, and I've been to Kansas and I was at UCLA and I've had teams in Arizona. I've taken teams into North Carolina, anywhere, you name it. The only place to me that even kind of resembles Racer Arena is at Duke and Cameron Indoor. The small, tight, loud, hot, packed, it was Racer Arena to me was such an advantage for us. I mean, and I've had conversations with, I forgot his name, Lindy, the great player at Austin Peay, Bubba Wells. We talked one time later and some other guys throughout the OVC and coaches, they would say the same thing. Like, we had no chance. We went in there it was the crowd, being on you. It was hot in there. I couldn't keep a jacket on the whole game. No chance. I was sweating everywhere. We were all sweating in there. And so I love the idea of a new building, but man, I love that. I loved Race Arena. I loved coaching in it. The players loved playing in it. And then that last year we had such a good team and, the momentum was just building. It was just, we had great wins against some great teams, but I will never forget how special, and the younger people won't know, but the older crowd around Murray, they get it. They know, they know that, the new building was needed. The program has elevated now to the Missouri Valley Conference and, things evolve. That's part of life. Things evolve, but we that are a little bit older, we understand Racer Arena. We get it. And we know that it was one of the most special places in the country, period. I don't care what league you're in. I don't care what level. It was that special for all of us, fans, players, coaches, everybody. It was just a special place.
Coach, you coached some great players, just some of the best that we've ever had in the program. You had a situation where you both inherited great players and you also brought great players into the program. The relationship, the key to building those first relationships when you came in with guys like Marcus and Vincent, what do you remember about that? What was that like for you?
The very beginning, it was tough. It was really hard because, like all the players, a couple things. Number one, they had allegiance to Scott Egger and the staff, which they should have. That was part of, that's part of the reasons why they came there. He recruited them. And so there was an affinity for Scott and those guys. And Scott had done such a great job. People forget they had played North Carolina the year before I took the job in the NCAA tournament and only got beat by 10, I think it was 8 or 10, and had everybody coming back. Everybody, we had 7 seniors that I inherited. So that group, and they played a style that was a little different from ours. And so just that whole transition at the beginning was, it was a little tricky. And I knew the key was Marcus and Vincent, those two guys. We had some other good players, but those two guys were difference makers. And, Vincent was on the fence. He was back and forth. And, I was heading down to Memphis and quiet as it's known, I guess statute of limitations. I don't know if it's a violation. I know Kern Alexander took a trip to Memphis. I mean, that in itself, I want you guys to think about that for a minute. The president of the university, the president was making an effort to make sure that Vincent Rainey stayed. That tells you all you need to know about Murray State right there in the support. And, Vincent decides to stay. And then Marcus was a senior. And Marcus had played off the ball. He was more of a two guard. I converted him a little bit more to a point guard that year. And that was a little bit at the very beginning. They were a little bit uneasy with that because Marcus was also the player of the year in the league. And here I come. I'm going to move him, change him positions. And, but I knew if he had a chance to be a pro, it was going to be as a combo guard that could play the point. Anyway, the transition was a little, tough. But I think for me, my only thing was I just wanted to pour into them, get to know them all really well. Fred Walker, Kenny, just drawing a blank, Kenny Taylor. Quentin Eccles. We had all these guys, Dwayne Davis, all good players. They were good players. So it was a interesting, beginning, but then that team really began to play well. And I really, still to this day, I feel so bad for those guys that year because we had seniors. It was their last year, and they had a great run at Murray State. And we end with a horrible, horrible call in the OVC tournament with less than 1 second to go. They call a foul on Vincent that wasn't a foul and sends Austin Peay to the foul line. It was a pitiful way to, a championship game where the winner gets to go to the tournament. And so we had that, in my view, we had that to deal with. And then we end up in the NIT and we got to go play at Missouri. And I'm not one to whine about officials, but boy, we got it stuck right to us up there in Missouri.
Big time.
So we were right there. We're knocking on the door to beat Missouri at Missouri in the first round NIT game, and 2 technical fouls late in the game. It was so anyway, I just felt so bad for those guys. I felt bad for Marcus and all those guys because, they deserved better. They deserved a better finish. And we just didn't deliver that for them for a lot of reasons. And I always felt bad about that.
Well, it certainly did not stay the momentum in any way of the program, though. And I think that's one of the neat things about the poetry of what happened next. You guys come back and you get to that championship game again. It's another tight one, except we got a little different outcome this time around.
I tell people this, and I don't know if I've ever said this to Lindy. Lindy and I have talked so many times, I forget half the time, but probably that second year for me, I was probably most proud of that year, of any year. I mean, we were really good the next year. Like the next year, our team was just better, like way better. But if you think about it, we really had 3 almost different teams for 3 years. The first year was Scott's team, basically. It was all those guys that we inherited, and we added a couple, guys in there. And then that next year, we had signed Isaac Spencer, Rod Murray, Aubrey Reed, Dwayne. We had signed them all, but they couldn't play. Dwayne, Virgil, and Marvin Gaye were at a junior college. And those guys were on campus, but waiting. So then that second year, Terry Mays, Chad Townsend, Vincent Rainey, those 3 perimeter guys, they were just wonderful. I mean, spectacular. We added Chad and Terry in with Vincent. And then we just kind of had a podge of guys around the basket, Matt Harris, Arnell Hamilton, Michael Floyd, just, guys that were good, but not great. And that team ended up, winning the OVC tournament. And then we got a chance to play as a 15 seed. We're going to play Duke in the NCAA tournament. And we got them on the ropes. We're up 6 at the half. They had a little run in the second half. And, we actually have a, kind of a desperation shot to tie it. But that team, that middle team, in my mind, even though the first team was great, the third year was phenomenal. That team, to me, probably kind of overachieved more than the other 2, right, in my view. And, most proud of that team. And then that third year, here comes the military, here comes the reinforcements. They're all coming. And now we knew we had a chance to be really good that third year, which we ended up having a nice year.
Yeah, talk about a little bit, because a key player, you mentioned his name a while ago, that a lot of people don't talk about, that was very instrumental in the team's success, was Dwayne Virgil.
Dwayne, and he was so good. I remember Tavester and I heading down to Trinidad. We flew into Port of Spain, and and met with his parents. And Tavester just did a magnificent job. And, you know, T was the Virgin Islands national team coach for years and years. So he had relationships with a lot of people there. And, you know, I came from UCLA. We never recruited anybody at UCLA that maybe academically was on the fence. That was just part of UCLA. Well, now all of a sudden I've got some guys that are going to end up being Prop 48s way back then, which meant they could come, but they couldn't play that first year. That was new to me. I didn't really know, you know, how to go about all that. And then we got Dwayne and Marvin coming from Trinidad. And rather than making them sit out, again, we didn't really know. We put them at Palm Beach Community College. And a lot of people don't know this story too, but, you know, the coach there, Pat Klingler, was a good friend of mine, Tavester's, all of us. You know, we got to know him really well. And so Dwayne and Isaac, you know, end up, we call Pat and say, Pat, we'd love for you to take these guys if you can. He said he would. And then I said, Pat, but you got to protect them now because they're pretty good. You got to protect these guys for me. And people may not know this story, but this is true. John Thompson came in there, big John Thompson, 6'10" John Thompson. And he watches them practice one day, and he told Pat, he said, Pat, I want to visit with them too. He's at Georgetown. Pat said, nope, you can't even talk to them. Those two, they're going to Murray State. John Thompson was madder than a hornet. He said, I want that guy right there. He said, you can't have him. And so anyway, having those guys, Dwayne Virgil was such a good player. And obviously in the OVC back then at that time, you know, 6'9" and probably 245, just built, athletic, could score. And he was kind of the anchor then, which all of our other pieces could play around. But, you know, Tavester Anderson did a great job there, you know, getting those guys from Trinidad. And so it just ended up being, like I said, the reinforcements were coming that third year, and we all knew it. And then we knew we had a real chance to be good.
Lindy, one thing I want to let both of you talk about as you're here in the middle of Coach's career at Murray State, you've already sort of referenced the magic of thinking big and having that concept really be realized within the program. And I think anybody that's watching us right now, you know, I know the man's doing some speaking, some motivational speaking. We ought to have a headset on him. He ought to be working as an analyst full time because he's magnetic, right? I mean, it just sort of jumps off. And you've talked about that a lot. I know you were so drawn to the personality and what he wanted to do here. Coach, I know that was key to your brand. I'm going to let both of you talk about it from your perspectives. But Lindy, from where you sat, watching him work and beginning to interact with him, tell us just how important that thought process, that concept was to what he was building.
Well, no, the first thing, one thing I really loved, and now I know why he's doing what he's doing now, because he wanted to speak wherever there had, you know, a group of people. I mean, I went with him to several times. I mean, he'd call and say, hey, I'm going to speak here, I'm going to speak there. He loved speaking. But I really knew he loved it when we were going to have John Wooden in, big fundraiser. $50 a ticket. That was big money back then, Mark. John Wooden was going to come in. And so we got selling tickets, and then John Wooden is sick. He couldn't make it.
Yeah.
So we're going to get Gene Cady to take his place. Mm-hmm. Right, Mark?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Gene Cady's going to, I'm thinking, he used to coach at Western in the back of my mind, Mark. I'm thinking, oh. But anyway, they had a good relationship, and you know, but anyway, the weather got bad. He couldn't fly in. So guess who our speaker was? Mark Gottfried.
Yep.
Mark Gottfried stood in for John Wooden. He can always say that the rest of his life. He stood in for John Wooden. But no, and you could just tell he had it. I mean, back then, you had to make any money being the coach at Murray State, you had to sell sponsorships for your coach's show. I mean, that was your money, right, Mark?
That's right.
You had to do it, though. I mean, it wasn't, nobody was hired to go out and do this stuff. He was doing it. Mm-hmm. And the show was 30 minutes always in the past. Okay. That's about all we could do. Well, we had to go an hour, and it was full of ads. I think he sold 50. I don't know. I think maybe 20 was the record. He doubled everything. I've never seen it. But it ended up being an hour-long show to fit all the ads in. But that was the one thing that I really noticed. I knew that he was just different. I mean, you know, being able to do that had an automatic impact with people. You know, you met him, you felt like you knew him, and that's always a good quality to have. So,
Coach, where did that come from for you? I know some of it was probably natural, but were there people in your life, whether coaches, your dad, your uncle, who sort of influenced you to be the guy that thought the way that you did?
Well, there's no question. My Uncle Mike and my father, those two guys. And then, I played for a really good coach, Wimp Sanderson. I had 7 years with Jim Herrick. Obviously, he's done a lot of winning. So, but for me, my dad and my Uncle Mike, after a game, first calls were those guys. I'd call them, they'd call me. Uh, they always had, something to add, or, if a piece of advice. And then there were times too throughout the year that, I called John Wooden on the phone. I was very fortunate to have a relationship with him. Matter of fact, he and I talked a lot before I took the job at Murray, and he was excited for me. So, I think that I just had kind of a group of people around me, but nobody has influenced me more than my Uncle Mike. And I tell this story, Travis, all the time. Because I'm on a lot of other podcasts now and I do a lot of other things, and people talk about when did you really decide you wanted to coach? And I probably always knew it. My dad was a high school basketball coach and a small college coach. He ended up a couple years at SIU, but most of the time he was at a small college, Division III. I can remember sitting on the end of the bench way down there as a little guy, young guy. But I always tell people this one too. I remember at Murray one time, we came to a football game, and I think I was in the 9th grade. So I must have been 14, maybe probably 15 years old. And you go down into Stewart Stadium there, and they had the big room where they used to do the halftime stuff, big hospitality room. I don't remember the name of the room there. But anyway, Mike had all the guys in there. He had all the football team in there. And there had been, I don't know, 70, 80 guys in there, coaches, maybe, who knows how many. It was a bunch. And this was right before they'd go out to play. And he had them in there, and they were all holding hands, and they had their pads on, football helmets. I mean, they were all ready to go. And they were in there singing. They sang this song called Love Lifted Me together. And I remember sitting there thinking, wow, like I understand, coaches, we all want to win, but we have a chance to impact, younger people or, potentially your players. But I think that day it really resonated. Like, it hit me really hard. Like, wow, okay, what an influence, what an influence that Mike Gottfried, my uncle, had on all these young people in the room. And so for me, that was kind of a moment where I was like, and I always remember that. Every time I walked into that room down there was a big hospitality room there. When you come down the steps, it was on the left. Anyway, even when I coached there, I'd go in that room and I remembered that day. And so, obviously, my dad coaching, my Uncle Mike, those two guys, I've been blessed to be around great people my whole life. But when it's family like that, and they have no agenda, they're when they call in their comments or an observation, or if I have a question, it was going to be genuine and authentic. The answer, that's all. And so those guys to me they still are to this day, my role models.
And Mark, you had this, Lindy, I'm sorry. I was just going to ask him one more question about the big time thinking. One of the things I love to say about this place is we are a small town, obviously, and we love that. But being small town doesn't mean you can't be big time. Mm-hmm. And Lindy talked about the recruiting piece, who you wanted to go after. Mm-hmm. Had to be pretty special, especially as you got into that 3rd year and saw what you had, to know you were building something that at Murray State could compete with anybody, anywhere.
Yeah, and I'll be very honest with this one. I knew after the let me go back. After the 2nd year, Lindy will remember this. After the 2nd year there, we were playing, was it in Greensboro, Lindy? Or Charlotte? We were playing in the NCAA tournament, and the Tennessee job was open, and their AD came. And of all things, he sat in the Murray State section. I think that was, I didn't know it at the time, but.
Yes, I remember it well.
Yeah, he's sitting in the section. Well, he ended up calling me, Doug Dickey, and we talked on the phone a couple times, and I just didn't feel right about it. I didn't feel right. I I don't say this a lot, but I'll tell you guys, and the world's going to know it after I say it. Jim Herrick had some NCAA troubles, whatever. He wanted me to distance myself as far away from Jim as I could. I remember telling him on the phone, I said, Coach Dickey, I said, Coach, he helped me. He gave me a job. He gave me my first job in coaching. He promoted me 3 times at UCLA in 7 years. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to distance myself from him, period. He helped me. And that's not who I am. And I remember telling him that. The Georgia job opened up that year as well. And I remember my Uncle Mike calling me and saying, do you want the Georgia job? And I had a feeling the Alabama job was going to open up, but I didn't know when. And so I didn't, I told both Georgia and Tennessee, I'm not interested. And we just all moved on. But even after that 3rd year, guys, Travis, I knew how good we were going to be in the next couple of years at Murray. Like, I knew it. This team has a chance to roll. But it was my alma mater. It's Alabama. I'd played there. It was a tricky one because I also knew, and I loved Murray. I wasn't in a hurry to leave. It wasn't like I was just chomping at the bit to get out of there. And so if it wasn't for Alabama or something like that, I'm not sure I would have even left after the 3rd year.
Lindy, go ahead.
You had a chance to come back recently and visit, with Isaac's number being hung, of course, and that team being honored of Coach T's there. What was your reaction coming back to Murray, seeing the program, seeing the arena, seeing the practice facility, seeing the town?
I was so impressed, Lindy. I was so impressed. I've been in the building, the new building. I say new, it's 25 years old. How about that? I'm still calling it the new building. But I had been in there, but I had never watched a game in there. That was the first time I've watched a game. And, for a lot of years, my teams played. I couldn't get there during the season. But I was just so impressed. I'm so impressed with what Nico, the AD, is doing there. The commitment there, the support has even grown. I think our fan base has grown, obviously, from where it was in Race to Arena. And so I was just so impressed with everything. And I was so happy too, Lindy, that you and I spent a ton of time together that night and the day of the game, the night before. And we're sitting over there in a hotel, and Isaac and Aubrey and these guys and Aaron Page and Mike, we're just telling stories. But Isaac Spencer looked at me in the lobby there, and he looked right at me and said, Coach, I wouldn't be the man I am without you.
Right.
And I'm gonna start crying.
Yeah, I was there.
And I remember saying, I wouldn't be who I am without you. So
yeah,
special.
Yeah,
special.
That's what it's about right there, brother. That was a special night, and I told Travis, and we talked about it on the podcast. That night just was really, really neat. Seeing Aubrey, the guy that you recruited to come off the bench, right? The backup, Aubrey Reese, that you recruited. Aubrey, what did I tell you after I went to that first pickup game? I said, I like that Reese kid.
He said, I like that Reese guy.
He was a backup.
Hey, I've told people this one too, Travis. If I was a general manager in the NBA tomorrow, I'd hire Lindy Suter as my first scout. He can see talent. He sees it before everybody sees it. I don't care. And he and there's going to be a couple more stories we're going to talk about where I'm going to prove that to be true. But Lindy, he's watched so much basketball. He can watch and say, that one right there, that guy right there, and he could call them. And he has over the years, period. But before we do that, I'm going to tell you one more story. It's funny. We were in the lobby there at the hotel, and Isaac and we were hugging, and Isaac Spencer, what you talk about a great person now. You talk about a heart of gold, that guy. And, when he told me that, and I looked back at him and I teared up and I gave him the biggest hug, and we sat there and hugged. And then I remember we were laughing with Aubrey, and Aubrey Reese said, Coach, you pulled a Lane Kiffin on us. You pulled a Lane Kiffin. And I said, Aubrey, I didn't do a Lane Kiffin. He said, oh, yeah, you Lane Kiffin this, man. You Lane Kiffin this. So we had the best time. that night. But no, to answer your question, Lindy, it was such a great. I was so happy to get there. I was so happy to be around Murray, and again to see what's happening with Ryan Miller, the coach, the players. There's no question the program has elevated itself up to another level, being in the Missouri Valley now. So anyway, I was just really, really happy to be there.
Lindy, how about those stories, some of which can and some of which can't be told, about Coach and Coach T down south recruiting?
The church story tops it all. That's
Want me to share it? Can I share it?
Go ahead and share it.
Yes.
And I probably have shared it, but you share it because it's better coming from you.
I don't even know if this would have been a violation, but if it was, the statute of limitations is going to take care of me. This is a long time ago.
I think in the church, Coach, it's legal.
It's legal.
Tevester took me to this little church way down in deep South Georgia. Here's the funny thing, though, with Tevester, and I love that guy more than anybody on the planet, but he would take off and go recruiting, and he'd be gone for 3 or 4 days, 5 days. Sometimes I wouldn't hear from him. I'd call him on the phone. I said, T, where are you? He said, Mark, why you always ask me where I am? He said, don't worry about where I am. So he's down. He takes me to South Georgia, and we get off the highway, and we head down this red clay, road, and we end up in the deepest part of the backwoods, and we're in this tiny, tiny little cinder block church, and I'm the only white guy in there, and we're sitting there, only about 40, 50 people in the whole church, and the pastor decides to pass the offering plate around. He said, we're going to pass the plate. He said, I think God is telling us right now we need to have an offering. And so we're sitting about 5 or 6 rows back, and when the basket comes to me, I look in there, and it's all $1 bills, and so I'm thinking, I reach in my wallet, and all I had was $100 bill, and I'm thinking, I got to put something in there. And so I dropped $100 bill in there. Well, it's sitting right on top of all the $1 bills. Well, it goes around, and they take and hand it to the pastor. They hand the little basket to the pastor. The pastor looked down in there, and I know he saw that $100 bill. He said, I think that the Lord wants us to have another offering right now.
That's a good one.
Okay, how many of these I got? But we had the best time. Tevester, best there ever was. And I got another great Tevester story I'm going to share with you. I'm a new head coach, brand new. I'm excited, and we're all into this, and so I want to have these staff meetings in the morning. And so I started off doing them at 8:00 in the morning. I wanted the whole staff there. Well, Tevester would come in about 8:30. He'd roll in, and we'd talk, and we're talking about our team. So finally, I sat him down one day. I said, T, I said, I really need you to come at 8:00, with the staff meeting. He looked right at me. He said, Coach, he said, I'm not signing anybody 8:00 in the morning. I sign them 8:00 at night. He said, I'll be here at 8:00 at night on the phone. You guys go ahead and meet in the morning. Best there ever was. So great times.
Coach, I have never met a person who could make you feel better about yourself than Tevester Anderson could. I mean, just unbelievable.
Yeah, same guy.
And, it's a funny story too, interesting story. The job at South Alabama had opened up in Georgia. Their coaching staff had just got let go. And I remember, I think it was, can't remember who they hired at the time, but I remember calling my dad saying, you guys ought to consider Tevester, and I've known Tevester through the years. And then I'm thinking to myself, why am I telling you guys to hire him? I need to hire him. And there's another example, though. I'm going to tell everybody that, Tevester had a couple years left in his retirement system. And Murray, I think Kern Alexander stepped up again, or Mike Strickland, I can't remember, but we were able to buy his years in so that he could retain his retirement, and to get him to come to Murray. And so having Tevester there with me those years was very important for me. Tevester had been, he'd been through the wars now too, at Auburn and at Georgia, and Tevester was so well liked, so well respected. And you have to remember this too. Even though I had played at Alabama, I gone to Los Angeles, and my 7 years were in LA. And so now I'm coming back to the South. So Tevester put me in his car and he took me through Georgia. And we went to all of the older guys that were his guys. They were all his buddies. And most of them were some older black guys. And they were phenomenal coaches. They had all had great success, whether it was in Macon, Atlanta, it didn't matter where it was. And when Tevester walked me in there and he looked at these guys and said, "This is Mark Gottfried. He's my guy. He is my guy." It gave me instant credibility with all those guys that I didn't know. I didn't know them all. One of which was Donald Dollar. And I ended up signing Cameron Dollar at UCLA. That was one of the guys. But Tevester, and I'm so thankful that he did that because without him, those guys might have knew who I was, but they didn't have that affinity for, we were connected right off the bat. So Tevester was such an important part of our 3 years there. And then I was so happy when he got the job, and, to see him do well and all that, I couldn't have been more happy for Tevester.
Coach, when you think back about that last team, again, 29-4, 16-2, 25th ranked in the country by the end of the year, I know you had a lot of great players. In fact, probably one of your biggest challenges was making all of that fit together. Was there a guy or guys? Was there a game or a moment? Was there something that you believed that became the special ingredient that unlocked the full potential of that club?
A couple, 3 or 4 different ones. One is our opening game. We went to Dayton, and the place was packed. Because Dayton has great basketball fans, just phenomenal. That place was packed. Oliver Purnell was the coach, and they had a nice team. They had a really nice team. And we went in there and handled them. I mean, really handled them. And I remember walking to the bus, and back then, to play a bye game, they gave us $25,000. Now it's a whole lot different deal. But I remember the assistant athletic director actually handed me an envelope with our check, and I remember handing somebody else thinking, we got a chance to be pretty good here. And then I think the next one was, we went to Western. They were struggling. It was right before Christmas, and we pounded them pretty bad, like beat them really bad in Bowling Green. And we went straight to Nashville, hopped on the plane, flew to Puerto Rico. And, the opening night we played Michigan, and they had Tractor Trailer and Gerard Ward and Lewis Bullock. I mean, they were bigger and better, and, they whipped us pretty good. And I remember going back, and I want to say, I think we were undefeated. I think that was our first loss. And we went back to the hotel that night, Travis, and our guys, I could tell they were a little shook on that one, because I think they thought we were going to beat Michigan.
Right.
And we were in the hotel, and man, it was quiet at the meal. And the other game, Arkansas gets upset by the local team there. I used to call them Puerto Rico mayonnaise. It was Maganes or whatever. But anyway, they beat Arkansas, and they've got Derek Hood and Pat Bradley and all these guys, and we got to play them the next day. And I remember calling the guys up to the hotel room and telling them, guys, we're good. Like, we're really, really good. You got to believe how good we are. And we came out that next day, and we handled Arkansas pretty solidly. It wasn't close. It was a pretty good whipping that we gave them. And then we had to play Iowa State the next night with Tim Floyd, the coach, and they had Marcus Fizer, and they were awfully good. And Terry Mays made a 3-point shot there to go to overtime, and just had a spectacular game. But I think that trip convinced our players that we can play with anybody in America, anybody. Didn't matter who it was. But we knew we could play with anybody in the country after that trip to Puerto Rico.
Lindy, what are your best memories of that particular club?
Oh, wow. Travis, that's a tough one right there. Just their, not only how good they were so entertaining. They were an entertaining basketball team to watch. I mean, you had Chad Townsend, the older Army guy, running the point guard. You had Aubrey, the tough dude, coming off the bench. You had DT, the ultimate showman. I mean, if you ask me right now, who's the top 5 players that you would like, just watch them play, DT's right there, no question about it. He enjoyed the game. I remember Mark calling DT in and told him he's going to have to start shooting the ball because that's why we recruited you. You remember having to tell DT that? And I also remember Vincent telling DT and Chad in that in-between year, I know what you guys got going on. You better start passing me the ball son. But anyway, that 97, 18 was just so entertaining. Getting to the top 25, this is prior to social media. There's no X, there's no Facebook, there's no ESPN Plus, there's none of this stuff. So being able to get the program, that kind of recognition during that period of time, to me, is one of our all-time greatest things that we've ever done. And and
what an exciting time for the Racer Insider, right?
Yeah, the Racer Insider started up. Well, we started that up actually. I remember that was in the end of that season. We got cheated in Nashville. It was actually Mark's first year. I started it up kind of as an experiment. I sold enough ads to pay for it, and me and Steve Parker put it together, and we went to that game and sold them for $1 a piece. Mark came over to the house afterwards. Remember all the dollar bills, because we used to watch the replay on the old, what is it, QTV? I think Larry McIntosh was calling the game as a rerun. We go to my house and watch the replays right away, and enjoy the win. But yeah, that right there, and then of course going to my first OVC tournament and getting cheated and almost getting kicked off of press row. My second game in, I think that happened about 3 times at Missouri. I'll never forget, Mark. I hit that table, and the table started bouncing, and there's some little guy on the computer next to me and said, I understand you're upset, but I've got a deadline to meet. I said, tell your deadline. We're getting screwed. And we got a really good cheating that night. But yeah, but anyway, also, Mark, while we're at it here, before we run out of time, I'm 68 now. So, I don't know how much longer I'll be doing what I'm doing. I would like to pick up a part-time job. So, any of those NBA guys need a little help.
So,
tell them to give me a call.
Hey, okay. So Travis, you got to hear this story now. So this is Lindy. First of all, I'd bring the guys in, and that year we had, Aubrey and Isaac and Rod and Ray Cunningham. They had to sit out. So they were playing intramural basketball. Well, Lindy would go watch the intramural games. He'd watch them play. So I was getting scouting reports, left and right from Lindy on all the guys, and and he knew who could play. Trust me. I learned quickly. I was going to trust Lindy's judgment on who he thought could play. And so years pass. It's a year later. I'm scouting for the Mavericks, and I get a text message or a call. I think it was a text. It said, we have the best freshman we've ever had at Murray State. And I'm thinking, hold on a minute. There's been some players come through Murray State. Now let's go back to Popeye Jones, and there's been some dudes now. We're talking about some real dudes. And Lindy is telling me, he said, no, this freshman is the best ever. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute now. So I get on a plane and I fly into Charleston, or wherever we were, Charleston, Illinois.
Eastern Illinois.
Me and your brother, and we sit in there. We have a little bite to eat, and we go and I watch John Morant, and I'm scouting for the Mavs. And there's not 100 people in the gym there at Eastern Illinois. And I keep watching this guy thinking, oh my goodness. Did Lindy Suter call this one or not? Like, I had to go back and write reports, and I'm writing this report, and this guy's got to be on. Put him at the top of the list. I'm not sure he's going to come out this year, blah, blah, blah. It's all that, but I'm writing my report. But I can remember Lindy telling me that he's the best, most talented guy we've ever had at Murray as a freshman. And truth be told, he's excited about another freshman right now at Murray State. Lindy's real excited, and so am I. We got a really good freshman there now, but Lindy has always been able to see him. He calls it, and he doesn't waver, and period, and end of story, full stop. So that's kind of always why I think Lindy and I too have had a great relationship, because he loves the game. Like Lindy, and I'm saying this, you're on the call. He just, he loves all the sports there and supports them, but basketball, he just has loved the game, and he loves to watch. And it's like he said, when I was coaching, I used to go to his house after the games and watch the replays, and we had the best time. But when you have somebody like that that loves your program, it's a great thing for the coach. So
Well,
Also.
and Coach, I'm gonna tell you something about him as an evaluator and as a basketball fan. And you guys were always meant to be great friends because you were a phenomenal shooter. And Lindy, what do you love best?
Shooters.
Period.
Right there,
What I said
there it
about
is.
Isaiah Cannon that year, you're calling the game out at California. One of your first games you actually did on.
That's right.
I think Murray was playing California. It was
That's
Isaiah
right.
Cannon.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's right.
that's
right.
why, because he could shoot it.
He
BT
could
could shoot it. BT 40-something% 3-point shooter. Think about that now.
We used to run to Terry Mays off this double screen, and especially in Racer Arena, he'd end up on the far end in front of the visitors team's bench.
Oh,
And he'd come off and he'd be heading to that corner right in front of the end of their bench. And he'd rise up and drill a three, and then he'd reach his pocket and he would put like he was putting money in his pocket as he was going down the court. I said to Terry, you got to stop that. He said, come on, coach, I can't stop that.
I loved it when another team would turn it over a couple of times. He'd be coming down the court saying, "McDonald, they're serving apple turnovers over here." So he was one of the greatest entertainers, no doubt about it.
And all of those guys just great.
And what a great story he was too. He didn't play high school ball.
You know, Travis, I asked his junior college coach when we signed him. I called him after we signed him, and I told him, Paul Jones. I said, Paul, do you think that Terry can average 15 points a game for me this year? And he said, no. And I'm thinking, oh, my God, here I am. He said, don't get me wrong, coach. He said, he's going to average more than 15 for you. Trust me on that one. And he was right. So he was right.
Well, you've had some awesome friends at that level because I keep going back to the story where the man protected you from John Thompson. It takes a great friend to stand in front of Big John.
And he did. He did.
But that network, you know, I just
relationship too.
Yeah.
John and that coach had some sort of relationship.
Oh, they did. Yeah.
So,
I'm thankful to him. But, you know, all those guys, Travis, and all of us that coach, we all have, you know, the recruiting stories. Most people don't, you know, they don't really know how a guy ends up there sometimes. Right. And, you know, I never watched Chad Townsend play. It was the last day of recruiting, July 31st, way back then. And on July 30th, I told Tavestre, I said, I'm tired. I'm going home. I'd been out the whole month. Back then, you went out on July 5th. You came back on August 1st. And so July 30th, I said, I'm heading home. And Tavestre watched one more day, called me that night and said, I found us a point guard. I'd never watched Chad play. And wow. Chad had been in the military. You know, Terry's story was amazing. Dwayne and Isaac. Those guys are amazing. Rod Murray, Aubrey. So anyway, we were able to put it all together and we had a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun there.
Well, you know, that thing that you recognized that day in the football locker room, I think it just sort of highlights and underscores what this business is about. It's a people profession. Mm-hmm. The relationships built with your staff, the relationships built with the people you're recruiting from, obviously the relationships you build with the players and their families and the influence you try to wield in a positive manner. And, you know, you are in the people collection business. And that's why when you get this far down the road in your career, the stories are literally by the hundreds and they're all about people, which is an awesome thing to be able to say.
It is. And, you know, in Murray, I have said this when we started, and Lindy and I have talked about this so many times, but I hope people there truly understand how unique Murray State is. It's not everywhere. You can go all through the country and, you know, especially when you get out of those high majors, you know, where you're in the ACC or SEC, but there's just not a lot of places like Murray State. And I can remember taking a picture at a Final Four. I think I was the head coach at NC State. Mick was at Cincinnati. Steve Prohm was at Iowa State, and Billy Kennedy was at Texas A&M. It was four of us. And we took a picture together. And I remember the four of us saying, where else in America is that happening? Like, it's been a place for so many people to advance themselves from, but the community, the support, I just hope people really understand what you really have. Like, don't take it for granted, because it is such a special place. And like we talked about earlier, when I sat in the gym the other day in the arena, or a couple months ago, and Isaac Spencer's jersey went up there, I'm just thinking to myself, what a wonderful place for Isaac to have come to school and to play. What an experience he had. Those guys talk about their experience at Murray State as more than some of the guys I've ever had at Alabama or at NC State. They loved their time there. They loved it. So I just hope people really understand that at Murray, you got something amazing. It's special. It's unique. Protect it. Like really just protect it forever. And I will say this, Lindy Suter, he is as much as anybody, he has protected that without allowing anybody to route us, without us losing it. Even the move to the arena and all of the steps, we all have to evolve, but it's still one of the most special, unique places there is in the country, in my opinion, period.
Well, we agree very much, Coach. And Lindy, as we get ready to let Coach get to the rest of his day and you to the rest of yours, as racer historian and also guardian of this brand, before we wrap up, anything else you'd like to share about your friend here before we put a bow on it?
Just keep doing what you're doing, Coach. I mean, the stuff that you're doing now is very impactful on people too. I've been able to listen to your podcast, the messages you put out. I know you're into the motivational type speaking now and speaking at different places, and you're a champion at that too. I mean, you're really, really good, and I've listened to a lot of people. So yeah, keep spreading that message that you're spreading.
Thank
you, Lindy. I appreciate all the kind words that you just said about me.
Yeah, no, it's the best. Lindy's the best. Everybody knows it. Hope they know it in Murray, but I'm a fan, guys. I'm always watching scores. I'm watching the game. I'm watching our team, and I'm glad we kind of getting back on track right now. And so
I'm sending Roman Dolman highlights.
Hey, by the way, he called that one from day one. Day one. So lots of fun, guys. Thank you.
Yeah. The scout never rests, Coach. And Coach, again, thanks so much for your impact here and in the business. And we just appreciate you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, guys. My pleasure. Thank you.
Lindy, you got the last word as always.
Go Racers.
Go Racers. All the time. Go Racers.